Welcome to video number 3 in a collection of 5 about Poststructuralist Discourse Analysis, or PDA. In this video, I discuss source material for PDA. I will touch upon source collection and selection, and for this I use my own research project on Iranian foreign policy as an example. Collection involves the process of obtaining texts which reflect the discourse among the human collective you're trying to research. Selection is the process in which you limit the number of sources to a sample of text that is limited enough to be feasibly analyzed within the time span available for your research, yet representative of the discourse you study. Let me start with source collection. First of all, you want to make sure that your source collection matches your research question. In my case, the research was on Iranian foreign policy during Ahmadinejad. This means I collected texts which were representative of the dominant foreign policy discourse during this period, which was from 2005 until 2013. I did not collect texts which represent the more marginal foreign policy views in Iran or those among the Iranian diaspora. I did not look into domestic debates, etc. These bodies of text are all interesting and arguably also relevant for my research topic, but since my project focused on the foreign policy discourse and behavior of the Iranian government, my source collection was focused on the Iranian political system during Ahmadinejad. For the lion's share of my discourse analysis, the part which I focus on in this video collection, I used statements which reflected the discourses of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. These were the two individuals who were most central in giving shape to Iranian foreign policy between 2005 and 2013. Source availability is often an issue for discourse analysis. If you want to study, say, Ottoman foreign policy toward France using PDA, but you do not read Ottoman Turkish or you can't access the Turkish National Archives, you will have to choose a different research topic. In my case, accessing political statements was easy, as both Ahmadinejad and Khamenei had their own news services with their respective websites, president.ir and leader.ir. From these websites, I downloaded the relevant statements onto my computer. The fact that for practical reasons I use translations instead of the original Persian is a shortcoming in my research. Meaning gets lost in translation, and ideally you do your discourse analysis in the original source language. Now let's discuss source selection. For many projects, there are many more sources available than we can feasibly read and process in the amount of time that we have to do our project. Sometimes this means we need to narrow down the research question. Instead of researching, say, the foreign policy discourse and behavior of the Iranian government after 1979, one can limit the case study to a shorter period, one particular foreign policy issue or decision, one particular foreign policy maker, etc. The more specific, the better. Then still, it is likely that there are many more sources available than you can digest. This means you need to find ways to limit the number of sources. In the process of selecting your sources, the first thing to consider is representation. If you select a certain number of sources out of a larger body of texts, you will want to make sure that this selection of sources you use is representative of this larger body. Positivist approaches would call this a representative sample, and this is done before you start a project. In PDA, the principles of intertextuality and saturation are our guides in source selection. And the process of source selection happens along the way. I will now explain these two important principles. Let's start with the concept of intertextuality. This is the principle that texts are connected. They refer back to one another. The concept is used in discourse analysis to show how texts relate in the production of meaning. An example relevant to my research is the use of the Persian word for independence, istiqlal. An important slogan in the Iranian Revolution was Istiqlal, Azadi, Jamhuriya Islami, meaning independence, freedom, Islamic Republic. The current Iranian political system was the eventual product of this revolution. And because of this slogan, when Iranian political leaders today use the word istiqlal, independence, in their political speech, they automatically connote the concept of freedom and Islamic Republic. This is an example of the power of intertextuality in political speech. The fact that texts interrelate has implications for source selection. On the one hand, it means that the possible range of sources relevant to a certain discourse is even more endless than you might have assumed. There is literally no end to the number of sources you can read, because any text is by its very nature connected to other texts. On the other hand, intertextuality also means that we can limit the number of sources we read because the sources are connected. If texts interlink in the production of meaning, then all we need to do is read and read on until we get the full picture of this meaning. This is why we don't decide beforehand which text to read and when to stop, but we continue to read until we get the full picture. This brings me to the second principle, that of saturation. In PDA, we read and reread until we reach the point where the addition of new text does not contribute to our understanding in any significant way. The discourse starts to merely repeat itself. This is when we reach saturation, and this is where we stop. Saturation becomes particularly visible in the process of coding. When you start your discourse analysis, you assign new codes to the text one after another. But later on in the process, the stream of codes dries up, and this is likely the point where you've reached saturation. The process of coding the text is the topic of the next video. I will see you there.